The cost of sanctuary. U.S. cities are in a standoff with the Trump White House over immigration policies and federal dollars. I'm Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream. Today we meet a woman taking sanctuary in a church to avoid deportation and talk to officials debating whether it's worth losing federal funds to protect people in similar circumstances.
Sanctuary city. It's not a legal term in the United States, but the Trump White House says sanctuary jurisdictions are breaking federal law. These cities limit how much local police can help federal agents deport undocumented immigrants. There are more than 200 of them across the country, and their leaders say they're not afraid.
Not be intimidated.
We're going to stay a sanctuary city.
We're going to defend all of our people.
Now, the Justice Department is threatening their funding. It doles out $4 billion in grants annually to help cities fight crime, terrorism, human trafficking, and drugs. But the Attorney General says the money will be cut if sanctuary cities don't get in line.
I strongly urge our nation's states and cities and counties to consider carefully the harm they are doing to their citizens by refusing to enforce our immigration laws and to rethink these policies. Such policies make their cities and states less safe. Public safety as well as national security are at stake and put them at risk of losing federal dollars.
Well, the White House says sanctuary cities are breaking the trust of the American people. The cities say they're keeping the trust of their communities.
Now, before we get deep into the political debate, I want to introduce you to Janette. She is in her 20th year living in the United States. She has 4 children, and she's spending the current time in the basement of the First Unitarian Church in Denver, Colorado. She joins us with her translator, interfaith organizer Jen Piper. So, Janette, first of all, who are you hiding out from right now?
¿De quién estás huyendo? I'm not hiding from anyone because I'm not hiding where I'm at. My case has been public for many years, and the Department of Homeland Security knows exactly where I am. They know where my address is. What I'm doing is resisting. I'm resisting the laws that session says we should be rethinking, because both parties should be looking at our immigration laws and thinking about the impact that they have, and that we need a better solution for all of us immigrants that have been here for so many years living in this country that is their home.
Tell us briefly the situation that led you to take up residence in a church and not be at home with your kids.
The situation that led me to be here is this administration. So many policies changed. There's so many people like me whose cases became worsened, became more difficult because of the Trump administration and his rhetoric. He's attacking the immigrant community and minority communities, and he's forcing us to resist in these kinds of ways and taking sanctuary all around the country. There's 11 million people that he's pushing us to resist in a peaceful way, and to keep pushing in the immigration process, and to keep looking for resources that will lead us to be able to keep fighting to be with our families.
So, Janette, just to be clear, if you weren't in that church today, you could potentially be deported.
¿Te podrían deportar? Exactly. If I could be outside or in my house, they could come and take me away.
We'll come back to Janette later in the program. Malika?
Thanks, Femi. In addition to these ladies joining us from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Helen Gim is a councilwoman at large on the Philadelphia City Council. Her city is at risk of losing $200 million in federal funds. In Miami, Florida, which is complying with Trump's immigration orders, Michael Hernandez is the senior advisor and director of communications for the Miami-Dade County Mayor. In New York City, Yesenia Mata is the political director of the Dream Action Coalition, working on behalf of New York's undocumented immigrants. And in Franklin, Massachusetts, Jessica Vaughn is the director of policy studies at the Center for Immigration Studies. Welcome to the stream, everyone. I want to start with our community. 2 tweets exploring what a sanctuary city is, that definition. This is Philip who tweets in, "Sanctuary only means local enforcement won't voluntarily aid collecting non-criminals." So he's a bit critical of it, goes on to say, in other words, sanctuary cities don't offer anything like sanctuary. It's just a political sham. Helen, how would you define a sanctuary city?
Well, sanctuary cities came about not out of thin air. They came about because these policies were recognized by cities and counties who recognize that smart policing and safe communities depend upon trust, open communication, and adherence to the Constitution. It does not help anybody to keep our communities safer if people are afraid to go to the hospital, for parents to take their children to school, to report a crime. And it was very important for communities to recognize that after years of dealing with ICE's mistakes and after footing the bill for ICE's work, that cities and municipalities are upholding their right to the Constitution, to not hold people without a charge or warrant, to not detain people unless there's clear that there's a judicial warrant. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, 72 hours after the president suffers the most humiliating legislative defeat in modern history, it's no surprise that they then now want to come after immigrants as a diverting, scapegoating measure. But while Jeff Sessions was out there trying to score political points, I was in New York City with dozens of municipal elected officials from sanctuary cities all
what the
across
president
country,
is trying to do, with all due respect,
you're on the wrong side of the law,
like the one in
and you're on the wrong side of
Philadelphia,
history.
where you're releasing rapists literally to the street who've gone on to reoffend.
We're not literally releasing rapists.
What the
We're not literally releasing rapists
because of your sanctuary policy think about it, and about the fact that Philadelphia continues to release criminal aliens back to the street.
Yesenia, just give me a moment so I can hear what Jessica's saying, and then I'll bring you in.
According to him, someone who has driven out without a driver's license, that is what he considers a criminal. So what he's doing is broadening up that level of what he means, that a person who is undocumented is criminal. So
no, look, this is the problem. This is the exaggeration that's gone on here. Really is causing more fear in the immigrant community. What people like you should be telling people is
Yesenia and Jessica, Yesenia and Jessica, I almost hear both of your points, but not quite. Jessica, start again, because I didn't hear your point, because Yesenia and yourself were speaking at the same time. So Jessica, let me hear the point you're making, and then Yesenia, we'll go back to you.
The problem here is that the proponents of sanctuary policies are exaggerating the kind of enforcement that's taking place here, first of all. What they should be telling people is that victims and witnesses to crimes should never, ever be afraid to go to the police. They are not going to be targets for immigration enforcement unless they, too, are criminals. ICE's priority is to go after people who are causing problems in the community. That's what they're doing. They're not trying to deputize local law enforcement agencies.
Yes, they are.
All they want is treated the same as any other law enforcement agency and to have cooperation, so they don't have to go out to the streets to arrest people that the sanctuaries are releasing.
Okay, guys, let me just interject for a moment and say ICE is the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency in the United States. Yesenia, what was the point you were making?
Well, right now, under the Trump administration, what he says that only criminals, according to him, only criminals are going to be deported. Well, what we are seeing is that under the Trump administration, the point that I was making is just by the simple fact of you crossing to the United States, by the simple fact of you driving without a driver's license, you already fall under the category of being a criminal, as we have seen this mother who is inside
not
the
as a
church.
criminal, as
She is not a violent criminal, quote unquote, on what Trump says or his administration says a criminal is. So that's what we are trying to say, that yeah, we are not opposed of people who commit serious crimes, to be sent to jail. Obviously, we are not opposed to that, but we are saying that under this regime, what they are doing is putting hate in our community, in putting hate in the American people, just how the Nazis did with the Jews. So that's what we are against.
So Yesenia and Jessica, I want to bring up another point that our community is raising, and Michael, I'll direct this to you. This is via Twitter. One says, sanctuary cities allow for immigrants and police to trust one another when it comes to reporting violent crimes at the local level. Look at what happened in Miami-Dade. The county complied with Trump under no pressure, and now residents are scared of local police. Michael, can you explain to us what happened in Miami-Dade, and if you agree or disagree with this tweet?
I have to take issue with that tweet. Miami-Dade County has never considered itself a sanctuary community, ever. We have always complied with federal authorities. Since Mayor Jimenez and our county commission ratified his decision, there was just one small point that we changed in Miami-Dade County, and that was in December of 2013. We said that if the federal government is going to ask us to detain an individual, any individual in our custody for 48 additional hours, they would have to begin reimbursing us, because it was in the millions, low millions, but it was still millions of dollars that our taxpayers were having to pay. Immigration and Customs Enforcement did not reimburse us for that time period. What Mayor Jimenez decided to do on January 26 was issue an executive order, which needed ratification, and it was ratified, to say the federal government should still reimburse us, but we won't hold that against the federal government if they haven't reimbursed us in a timely manner. Why? Because we also were seeing of 176 that had been detained in our custody since the end of January, 103 had prior records, some very serious records. All we're doing is holding them for 48 hours if the federal government asks us to, which we had over 80,000 come through the Miami-Dade County jail system last year alone. So we really are talking about a very small percentage. They would be held for up to 48 hours, and the federal government will decide whether or not to come and get them. But Miami-Dade County never considered itself a sanctuary community. As a matter of fact, we were fighting that supposed designation since back in May of 2016 when the Obama administration named us one.
Michael, what do you understand by sanctuary city? Hold tight for a moment, because I want to ask all of our guests this. This is really critical, because there's a lot of conversation about sanctuary cities in the US. Michael, what do you understand by that? What is it, as far as Miami-Dade is concerned?
Yeah, well, that's one of the challenges. Yes. There's ambiguity. There's no one federal definition for what a sanctuary community is. And I see Rahm Emanuel, mayor of Chicago, and mayors from other cities across the country who proudly proclaim to be sanctuary communities. Look, we are a community here in Miami-Dade County of 2.7 million residents. 150,000 is the estimate that are undocumented. We want all of them, no matter whether you're a citizen, a resident, or undocumented, to continue to cooperate with our police officers, and to understand that if you are someone who is in our custody for violating local law, in other words, you violated some kind of local, county, or state law, then, and you are undocumented, then you run the risk of actually being identified by the federal government. But Miami-Dade County, none of its 34 cities, we're not immigration enforcement agents. Up until now, we have not been asked by President Trump or his administration, and our mayor and our police director have both been on record saying we would not have our police officers working with federal authorities. That's not the role of a local government.
Actually, in Pennsylvania, what we found was that there have been enormous violations of U.S. Constitution because communities have detained without a judicial warrant. What Philadelphia does is that we do turn over people to ICE. We make it very clear, though, that ICE has to get a judicial warrant. In Pennsylvania, we had a federal lawsuit with a case with a man named Galarza, a U.S. citizen who was detained without a warrant. He successfully sued the county, and he sued ICE for unjust violation of the U.S. Constitution. And that's the difference between counties like Philadelphia that are called sanctuary counties, but we're actually called that because we uphold the Constitution. And it's very disappointing.
No. You're not giving an accurate description of that case.
Excuse me.
The reality
here is that because it is disappointing to hear that communities and cities are willing to throw the Constitution out the window in the name of scoring some political points, when it's clear that this has been litigated in federal court. We're on the right side of the law, and we're on the right side of history.
All right, so Helen and Jessica, I want to make sure that everybody leaves this conversation who's watching this, who understands what sanctuary means. Let's say I am an immigrant. I do not have documentation. What does sanctuary mean for me, Jessica, in a sanctuary city, as far as you understand?
the term sanctuary city can mean different things to different places, but the point is all the federal government cares about is that state and local law enforcement agencies are not getting in the way of immigration enforcement, and that they're treating the immigration enforcement agencies the same way that they would any other law enforcement agency. And Congress is the one that determines how immigration enforcement agencies can go about their job, and they've said that they don't need a judicial warrant. In fact, there's no such thing as a judicial warrant except in the case of immigration crimes, and that doesn't apply. So these sanctuaries are giving throwing out a red herring to make it sound as if this is a constitutional violation when it's
Yesenia and Helen, just give me a moment. Guess, give me a moment, because I can't hear Jessica. All right, Yesenia, what were you trying to say?
Well, it's very interesting what Jessica says, right? That Donald Trump cares about the state, about the specific city. But for example, in New York City, the mayor mentioned that the city of New York is going to be kept sanctuary. And as we heard Donald Trump saying that he's going to defund these sanctuary cities, if he does that, do you know he's going to be defunding the NYPD, which the NYPD provides safety to the community? So it kind of baffles me just to hear what Jessica said.
First of all, I think it's
the
really
funding
important
would
to
be
establish
lost
that
only
there's
to
the
those law
difference
enforcement
between
agencies that are receiving certain kinds of grants. It's usually going to be a correction system, but it could be any jurisdiction that is deliberately getting in the way of immigration enforcement. And so that's a choice in some places. In others, this policy is forced on, for example, the New York Police Department, where the rank and file officers do not agree at all with the sanctuary policy. It's the mayor and the city council that are forcing them to refuse to cooperate with
Jessica, actually, the point that you're raising about local authorities not always agreeing then with state policies, actually, I want to bring in this tweet from Patricia, and I'll throw this to you, Helen, because this looks like some tension within the state of Pennsylvania. Patricia notes, our state government has cut funding to those sanctuary areas in the state. Local government has no standing. ICE runs the show, and this is what she's talking about. You see this headline, Pennsylvania Senate passes bill targeting sanctuary cities. Helen, what are you doing if this is indeed the case? If your own state Senate and lawmakers say we don't want these sanctuary areas in our town, are you crowdfunding? What's the plan?
No, I think that we were in New York City with dozens of municipal lawmakers discussing this. Clearly, there's litigation that's going to happen over this. And, you know, it's really a shame when people like Jessica are out there spreading all these kinds of ridiculous comments that somehow we're out of compliance when we have had federal litigation clearly demonstrating that sanctuary cities, and Philadelphia even calls itself a Fourth Amendment city, that we're in the right, and that it's clear that there's a difference between what law enforcement agencies are supposed to do. There's federal law enforcement, there's local law enforcement, there's state law enforcement. They don't overlap, they don't do the same thing, and they have different roles to play. And what Philadelphia is demanding is that we have a judicial warrant.
That Philadelphia was in violation of the
Philadelphia
law.
maintains
Not the Trump
a judicial
administration,
warrant,
it was Loretta Lynch's
and that
Department
ICE
of
has to
Justice.
do what every other law enforcement
guests who actually
agency
don't want
does
to listen
and
to
enforce
each
a warrant.
other. That's what happens when two guests are talking over each other. They actually don't want to listen to each other. Let me just give you a moment. Let me just give you a pause, because Janette is in Denver. I asked what a sanctuary is. Janette definitely knows what a sanctuary is because she is in Denver in a sanctuary church. Janette, you have a question for Jessica. Please, go ahead.
I have a question para Jessica. What it means to me is Sanctuary City should be something where we're welcoming everyone who's a part of our city, thinking that when we honor the detainers or the holds, what we're doing is we're driving a wedge between the community and police, and we're violating the Constitution. And unfortunately, we're going to find many people like Jessica who are anti-immigrant, but I would like to ask her, have you always been perfect in your life? Does your family have a perfect record? And then everyone's talking about criminals, and everybody's using that label really freely. And I've been able to debate with many people that are a little bit ignorant about how the criminal justice system actually works. And that when we enforce immigration laws and we make the police cooperate in that, we lose confidence with the police. And that makes for a bigger loss for the whole community. The police don't have the training to be involved in immigration law. And you're talking about all these laws and these different things. And I want to ask, why aren't you talking about the Department of Homeland Security has a quota where they're detaining 34,000 people a year as a business, where they're getting so many money from corporations? And I would love to ask her, why aren't we talking about the money that's behind this, how we get so much money from our pain?
Okay, Janette, thank you for that question. Yeah, let's ask one question, because Jessica can only keep that one thought in her head at a time. Janette, thank you. Muchas gracias, Janette. Muchas gracias. Jessica.
Yes, well, you know, the laws of our country are here to protect all of us. And what sanctuary policies do is protect that small fraction of the illegal immigrant population that have been arrested for other crimes. And that's, you know, those should be a priority. When sanctuary policies release those people back to the streets, they go on to commit other crimes, and we're all the victims of that. And that's the real problem. It's a public safety problem. No one should ever be afraid to report a crime to the police because victims and witnesses are never targets for immigration enforcement. And I wish the advocacy groups would get that message out more clearly.
Michael?
I may be the only panelist that actually agrees with a little bit of what everybody is saying, because in Miami-Dade County, when we use the word sanctuary, for us, it came from the federal government, and our immediate reaction was, we are not. Why? Because we always comply with federal authorities. But we made it very clear that our police officers, and it was Janette and the councilwoman and others who have mentioned it, and they're all right. Everyone is saying something here today that is actually accurate. And the fact of the matter is, we don't want our undocumented immigrant community to believe that their police officers, especially the county's police department, which has 2,800 police officers in uniform, that they are somehow the enemy, that they are somehow going to participate in raids. So we've gone to great lengths to make sure that that is not the case. And furthermore, we need their cooperation. Immediately after the mayor's decision, we met with several community activists here in the mayor's office, and one of them actually asked me, when you go out in that press conference in about 10 or 15 minutes, look straight into the camera and explain to undocumented women who are the victims of some kind of domestic violence or even sexual assault, and say that it is okay for them to speak to their police officers, to report crimes. That's a challenge we're having here in Miami-Dade County, because we're not targeting, our police officers are not targeting anyone. The federal government has its own responsibilities. By the way, they have a much larger budget than we do, and they certainly have the resources and manpower to enforce immigration laws. That's not what we're about. In Dade County, all that is happening is, if you are arrested for some kind of local law violation and you are in our jail system, and the federal government express an interest, a detainer request with probable cause, we will honor that as long as the federal government is actually coming and arresting that individual.
So, Guess, I just want to, Michael, thank you. Guess, I just want to very quickly go back to Janette, who is living in a church right now. Guess, I'm going to override all of you. She's not living in the most comfortable of circumstances. Janette, what is it like living how you're living right now? You say you are resisting. Give us a sense of how you live. I see a little one there. I see a bedroom. You're in a church right now. What's it like?
So really, I'm trying to have a normal life. For me, the only difficult thing is not be able to have my kids with me or do my work in organizing my community. As an organizer and activist, I always am out working in the community, but I keep doing my work here from the church. I stay productive.
All right. Janette Vergara, thank you very much for being part of this conversation. We're not over yet. I'm going to take all of our guests online. So we have Helen and Michael, Yesenia, Jessica. You hear the tension in this conversation. You've got a little slice of what it's like to talk about immigration in the United States right now in 2017. Malika?
I'll end with this tweet from John, who says, undocumented workers are an integral part of our economy, so everyone benefits when they can feel safe at work and at home.
All right, this conversation is not over yet. If you would like to be in the conversation, tweet us using #AJStream. If you're online, go to this specific address, stream.aljazeera.com. That is where you will see our online post show. If you're watching TV, open up a laptop and join us there too. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you soon. Hello, welcome back to our post show. The cost of sanctuary. U.S. cities are gearing up to fight the Trump administration over immigration orders. We're going to get back to our conversation. You could hear the heat in the conversation. Malika, where do you want to take us next?
Well, very timely conversation. This just came out Monday. Trump calls sanctuary cities an assault on the rule of law in a campaign pitch. This was an email to supporters in which he said, "Where is the sanctuary for the American citizens who have been victims of criminal acts by illegal immigrants?" So you hear that, and then you see a tweet. I'm going to go over here and bring you in, Yesenia. We got a tweet from Tadios who says several immigrant-serving organizations are organizing immigrants and working on the ground to protect the most vulnerable. When you see this is coming from the administration, what can organizations do? I know that your organization is one of those who are trying to help people who are caught in this in-between. What are you doing?
Well, obviously, after the election, many people have come out to help out the immigrant community, specifically allies. After the election, the allies came out and said, you know what, Trump does not represent us. He doesn't represent America. What they did was partner up with the undocumented community, and that's how the so-called underground and above underground railroad came about, where these allies have agreed to bring in undocumented communities into their home, as well, just in case if these parents are being deported, they have decided to take care of their children. And as well, we have seen restaurants say that they are going to be keeping their restaurant sanctuary, and teachers and students coming out saying that we are going to make ordinances where we say that ICE cannot come in here. And that is kind of what we are doing on a ground level, that we are making sure that the allies and the undocumented community both come together and show that the Trump administration does not represent us. And going back also to the tweet that said about how the undocumented community does contribute to this country, they contribute about $11 billion in taxes. Just recently, DACA recipient Belen Sisa came out showing that she's paying taxes, and she started getting so many death threats by Trump supporters or racist people saying that that is not true. And in this case, what's going on is that these people are not educated. They should educate themselves on how the immigrant community contributes so much to this country.
Helen, I'm just wondering, in Philly where you are, sanctuary, what does that mean? Practical help, what is that?
Well, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it, and I really did want to build off a little bit of what Janette was talking about. You know, for 2 decades, Republicans have blocked immigration reform, and as a result, 1 out of 10 American families are of mixed status. And what that means is that they have parents and siblings and loved ones who are undocumented. So really, this is not about just an attack on a small sector of marginalized people. An attack on undocumented immigrants is actually an attack on American families. And for us, what that means is that sanctuary, therefore, reflects on a place like Philadelphia. We've reversed 5 decades of population decline in our city, thanks in large part to immigrants who are repopulating our neighborhoods. They're sending their children to our public schools, and they're revitalizing our city with cultural vitality, life, and all of this stuff that makes
Helen,
it
I'm hearing
important for
broad
us
strokes
to
and
uphold
broad
the Fourth
politics.
Amendment.
I'm not hearing what that safety looks like. If you live in Philly and you are undocumented, how are you helping, Councilwoman?
One, we have a robust language access policy here in Philadelphia. We make sure that our victims and our witnesses are taken care of, that they're not asked about their immigration status ahead of any kind of communication. And of course, ultimately, what sanctuary means is we're upholding the Constitution. ICE is more than welcome to pick people up. They have to get a judicial warrant. And when they get a warrant, they simply do what every single law enforcement agency does as standard operating procedures. That's what sanctuary actually means. It doesn't mean we don't deport, because we do. It means that we are following and abiding by the Constitution. we're sending a clear message that our communities will not be targeted first and asked questions of and be seen and racially profiled. It means that we're going to take care of our communities and our cities. We're going to make sure that our police officers are able to do their jobs rather than do federal immigration enforcement. That's not their job. They're here to take care of our neighborhoods, of our students, of our young people, and of visitors who come here from all parts of the world. And that's an extremely important aspect of understanding sanctuary. It's not about violating
Helen,
the law.
The point that you're raising is also being raised by someone on Twitter. Steve says local police should not interfere with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. However, this does not oblige them to act as active deputies in ICE enforcement. So, Jessica, I want to throw this to you because what Helen was saying is we're simply asking for warrants. What do you make of what she said and also what this tweet says, that police should not be acting as ICE enforcement?
Mm-hmm. Right. The concern here is not about policies that welcome immigrants. Of course, all American communities welcome immigrants. The controversy here is not over, the federal government is not acting asking local law enforcement agencies to do anything on behalf of ICE. What the issue is here is those policies that are deliberately interfering with immigration enforcement by releasing criminals, that small fraction of the illegal immigrant population that has been arrested for a state or local crime. They're asking them to hold those individuals so that ICE can remove them back to their home country. To say that they need a judicial warrant is actually nowhere in the law. There's no such thing. And people like Ms. Jim that promote that idea are doing it deliberately because they know ICE cannot comply with that, and the law does not require ICE to do that. ICE provides probable cause. They provide administrative warrants of arrest or removal orders according to the due process that Congress provides under our Constitution. Sanctuary policies are interfering with that, and those are the policies like Philadelphia's that have been found to be in violation of federal law are the ones that are at risk for losing their federal funding, because if they're not complying with federal law, why should they receive federal grants?
That's really not true, Jessica. And part of the issue is that you're clearly unfamiliar with a 2014 federal case called Galarza, in which
I've read it many times.
Was detained without a warrant, and that the county and ICE were found liable for it. So it's clear that the Constitution does require a judicial warrant. It is simply not possible for counties and municipalities
That's not what Galarza found at all.
To detain people without a warrant.
That you're misleading everyone.
Without a warrant,
I'll leave it up to people to read it themselves to see what it really says.
Without a warrant, without a charge, or without an explanation. And that is not what is acceptable.
Ladies, let me just bring in Janette. Janette is in Denver again in a sanctuary church. Janette, you had a question about policy. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I wanted to say is that we're debating here and fighting here when people in Congress should really be doing the work, equally Democrats as Republicans. I'd like to show to Jessica that this is my taxes from when I came here to the U.S. Just like the Dreamer, I've been paying my taxes for 20 years, and that goes to people like maybe your family that ask for benefits from the government. Benefits that I can't ever access, but that citizens can, food stamps and other benefits. As immigrants, I pay my taxes, something that President Trump hasn't done or shown that he's done. How come he hasn't complied with the laws? He's standing up there saying we need to be deported, but I think everybody should look at themselves first before they're judging other people. Why won't they give us a paper in order to be able to contribute more than we are? We already contribute so much to this country. And then it doesn't make a lot of sense to be wasting our time having these debates at the local level when we elected people to Congress to solve these problems. And they're who needs to do this work. They're in Congress. Those are the people we need to pressure for better laws. We don't need to be losing time on President Trump, who is targeting us and targeting minorities around this country.
All right, Guess I'm going to leave it
and
here
then
because
going back to
this conversation is going to go on and on and on, and not just for us, but also for Americans and also for immigrants in America. Yesenia, you have the final word. Make it brief. Thank you.
Yes, just going back to what Janet said, Donald Trump right now in his administration is so focused on terrorizing the undocumented community, but what they need to focus on is Republicans. He needs to sit down with the Republicans and the Democrats and with the undocumented community to fix this outdated and broken immigration system. He claims that he cares so much about this country and its veterans, when right now his veterans are being deported. We don't know the estimate how many veterans are being deported, but many veterans are being deported. So if he claims that he cares so much about this country, then he should put his money where his mouth is and focus on fixing this broken immigration system, because immigrants contribute so much to this country, just like Janette and just like many others.
So much to talk about. No, can't fit it all into one conversation. We actually last week we talked about veterans being deported outside of the country.
I think it was last week.
Yeah, last week, or maybe it was the week before. Always something fresh to talk about with USA 2017. Thank you to Janette and Jen in Denver, to Helen and Michael, Yesenia and Jessica. I'm sure this conversation is not over, but this current one definitely is. It continues at #ADayStream. Take care, everybody.